Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everybody. I know that you've heard these two words before, but you probably don't connect them to what we're going to talk about today. Yes, this is Business Connected. The two words are identity crisis. Identity crisis. And that, I'm sure, has come up before. Sometimes, we go through changes in life and we reinvent ourselves and such. And along the way, we kind of lose ourselves. Now take those two words, identity crisis, and connect it to a company, a business, a corporation. There is a big challenge today with a lot of corporations going through identity crisis. Those who buy from them, those who are connected to them, many times don't even know what they stand for. We're going to talk about that today. She is a CEO and the woman behind all the business coaching at Innotar. And she's also the author of a book called The Dark Side of Agile Coaching. And it's great to have her back with us. She's our professional of the year. Angela Doyle is on the program. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me back, Steve. How are you?
I am very well and intrigued about the identity crisis. And more, I start thinking about this, where if you think about a corporation, what do they stand for? What's their mission statement? Even as a consumer, even looking at it there, I think there's a lot of question marks that go around. What's your first thoughts on this whole thing with the culture changing and the corporate identity crisis?
Well, I think I think I read recently that 70% of employees feel like they're not connected. Even though they're performing, they're not connected to the company. And so I think that has a lot to do with what we're seeing now. There's a big shift with AI, and that also is maybe encouraging that type of, less connectivity, less human interaction and engagement. And as we work remotely or in hybrid situations, that can happen as well. It takes a lot more effort to be able to communicate, to be able to stay engaged. And so as we go through some of this corporate identity crisis that we're seeing, this new trend that's coming out, and there's a lot of corporations that they measure the performance by KPIs. Now, the new thing is they're measuring it with not just KPIs. KPIs is performance, but do your people feel like they belong? Is there a belonging? And there is a purpose. So there's a lack of purpose that in a human-centric element that we are kind of missing when it comes to AI too. How do you balance both of them at the same time? Keep people engaged, make sure you have that retention levels that you need with great talent, but also be able to move forward when it comes to innovation.
I'm totally on your page with that. And I bet if we grabbed randomly, 10 people from different companies, corporations, and asked them, where you work, what do they stand for? What, and not just about we're here to make money. I'm talking a little bit deeper there. I bet you probably like that, that's that stat that you said, 70% of employees don't feel connected. Yeah, I'm betting it probably would be at that number where 7 out of those 10 people would say, they'd give it their best shot in terms of explaining what the company's about and, their mission statement. But it wouldn't be accurate, or there would be confusion. They wouldn't even be able to answer that. I'm thinking back to years where I worked for companies, and I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. It's bad.
Yeah, and I think it's getting a lot of attention right now because there is this trend where we are implementing a lot of AI, but we're missing out on the human element. So instead of replacing people, we need to use AI to augment the people, train them, make sure there's a lot of communication, and that we're listening. As CEOs at the C-suite, are we listening? Not just hearing, but listening. Some of the things that I think the team and the people want is they want to be heard, right? And when that disconnect happens, we're so focused on innovation, on building the next Fortune 500 big product or being able to make sure we perform. But is performance really the metric we need to be looking at? People can perform, but if they are not engaged or they're not going to feel like they belong, or you lose your great people because of that, there is another element that we're missing, which is the purpose. And that is a human element, What's their purpose in the overall mission, in the overall enterprise strategy that we're trying to get to, in the overall OKRs that we're trying to get to, our goals for the year, or our goals in general.
Now, when you say purpose, and that's a big one, many of us need to answer that question. What's your purpose? What's your purpose in life? Are you doing what you were destined to do? The talents you were given, are you using them? Would you say that somebody working at a company, corporation, isn't really sure what their purpose there is? They have skills and they're told what to do. Maybe it's kind of robotic, churn it out every day and then go home. But do you feel that they're not even aligned with their purpose?
Probably. I mean, I'm wondering if that's what the statistic is showing. I do know that there is there's times when you're going on a job and you're doing the job to get the paycheck, and but are we really innovating? Are we helping our people innovate? And are we as a company? Because it's really, it's a boomerang effect. When you give to your people, encourage your people, put investment in that resource, which is a person, then you get that back, in return, more times than not. So a company I used to work with, that was a long-time company that I worked with, SEIC. It was before SEIC was really publicly traded. It was an employee-owned company. We were given stock options. People loved working at that company. Cytor was another one. It was already sold, and it's no longer Cytor. But Cytor was another one that it wasn't about the money necessarily. It was about the purpose, the organizational culture. People would fight just to get in with that company. And it was a company that needed to be able to, just to have an interview, you got to know somebody. So I think that as we look back on AI, all this innovation that we're trying to do, and we're trying to have the cutting edge, I think the cutting edge for any corporation is going to be, how do you maintain your culture? Is your culture slipping? And are you in alignment? And that's the key. The key for any corporation or any CEO is, I would challenge everyone to kind of take some time out, take a pause, maybe every week, every 2 weeks, get everybody together and ask, are we in alignment? Not just your managers or your middle managers or your leaders, but the teams. Are you in alignment? There was one great CTO that I worked with I was a coach of that particular hedge fund in New York. And the one thing that impressed me about him was he wanted to find out what the feedback from the team was. So the teams created their OKRs, their objectives and key results for that particular quarter. And they presented them. It wasn't just the manager, middle manager. It was the whole team presented it to the CTO. And the CTO wanted that. He's like, I want one-on-ones with the team. They loved it. It was them being able to have an exchange, talking to him about what they would like, maybe certifications or any blockers they may have or impediments they have for being able to deliver a particular product on time. And he was able to hear it firsthand from them. But the other thing is that it increased morale. It was amazing how it increased morale that they dressed up, they got on camera, they were able, and this was people from India, from England, they were all over, and they were presenting this to him. And so I think that it's so important that it's not just product management or project management or middle management, but that we give some limelight and some voice to our teams, to our CTOs, our C-suite, whenever they have that moment. And it's valuable for them. It's more valuable than you think, because sometimes you think you're in alignment and everything is great, and then all of a sudden It's not. You know, there's a trust there. There's a trust that has to be, and I think people want trust. They want clarity. You know, that's how you build culture. Clarity, trust, transparency, and empathy. You know, anybody would come to work for anyone if they had that, and they have that type of covering, that type of corporation. And I would say that's kind of like a family. SAIC was like a family to me. And
Wow.
so how I got started with, you know, after grad school and everything. But I would say that you know, as a corporation, we have to kind of realize that all this innovation is great, but we have to manage it with how are we going to manage it by keeping the people that we need.
So that being said, and we talked about AI last year, and it has exponentially taken over to the point where, you know, the average person who is not even tech savvy is jumping into Chat GPT and just blown away what it's doing for them and making their life simpler. That all said, how do you approach your team and leaders and leaders talking to their staff and talk about AI without triggering fear? I mean, Bill Gates last month, Microsoft, said that almost every job will be replaced in a very short window. Scary.
Yeah, that is very scary. I think that's the worst thing to do. I mean, that is the worst thing to do. If you want a massive exodus, then definitely say that. If that's what you want. I mean, I don't think that, you know, building a company around fear is very healthy. I think it's very toxic. I don't think it's very motivating, even as, you know, you want to motivate your team to be the best. You want high-performing teams. It's also not part of what a high-performing team really, you know, the characteristics of it is motivated by fear. I mean, think about it. Are you motivated by fear? No. I just want to leave. I want to run the other way.
Oh my gosh! Talking to so many people that, and even myself back in the day when companies changed owners, and then you show up for work, what do you got? Fear. You don't know what's going to happen next. You know, it's not the way.
It's a lack of understanding of behaviors and how we're really working. From a robotics perspective that doesn't have emotion, doesn't have a human innovation, you know, all this creativity that we're thinking about, Google and all the various things like, you know, self-driving cars, watches now that can tell our blood pressure and our oxygen levels.
Yep.
All that came from a human being, not from a robot. Robots can only do so much. They can augment our productivity. They can augment how we're working.
Sure.
But it cannot be the main person, or we're going to cut ourselves out of the innovation cycle.
100%. And I was away last week, and I went away solo just to study, read, learn. Never did it before. Wonderful.
Awesome.
And part of it was doing a deep dive into AI and looking at a lot of research, experts, studies, surveys, and I'll generalize it, but most say that, yeah, it's great. Like you said, it augments what we do, but everything AI connected needs to be looked over by a human. Everything. Yes, it's great, but don't trust it fully. You know, it's, and I want to, trust that word. I want to read you something. This is as of today. Okay. And you're right on point here. And this is a news story. A study found there's one trait that can make you happier the rest of your life, no matter how old you are. Trusting other people makes us happier. And it's they did research on this, a whole study about it. And as you go through the trusting people and your intuition, it gets easier along the way. But trust is everything. You'll be a happy person when you don't have to pilot by fear. That's
right.
Right.
That is, yeah. And so I don't think AI, that narrative is a very good narrative at all. And I don't think it's going to serve the company well. In the long term, it's going to cause people to shy away from that company and not really want to work there. Because who wants to work in a place that they know is not going to be be stable?
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it nice?
Build a house on sand instead of on, a solid ground, right? So
the trust and transparency. Remember 5 years ago when companies would have a chat function on their website, and you send the question in, and you're thinking to yourself, I know that's not real. I know that's a bot. Come on. I know it, there's nobody there at, 4 a.m. answering my question. Come on. And then they got transparent and said, even called it, if it's the ABC widget company, the ABC bot is here. And it felt so much better just knowing that, all right, I'll get something done. Maybe they'll answer my question. But at least they're being transparent. At least I can trust this company a little bit more. They're telling me it's not a real person. We're just about out of time. Can we press the pause button and pick this up next time we get together?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think we have to, because I think it's so, it's so apparent. Like, there's a couple of things I want to leave everyone with that. Leaders are looking for transformation, whether it's an AI transformation, whether it's agile transformation, but they're looking for a transformation right now with AI being the big push, right? Mm-hmm. And innovation. And people are looking for meaning. They're looking to feel like they mean something and they have a purpose and there's stability. And we live in a world right now that's not stable. I mean, there's a lot of things going on that's affecting our economy, the stock market. Look at it, one day it's up, one day it's down. There's a lot of volatility. If there's a corporation that can create this culture and keep that culture, even though it's growing, that's the challenge. That small-minded culture that organizations that are amazing actually create. And they can keep that and keep their best people, then people will come running to you. You won't have to worry about the dollar. The dollar will be there as long as you have your purpose. People seek
Authenticity, and doesn't matter whether it's a person or a company, you can feel it. And you said a word that really, meaning. People are trying to find meaning. That's right. With their job, and same thing with a company and all of that. Angela, what's the best way to connect with you? You do coaching, consulting. You do deep dives in all of this stuff that we're talking about. We're just skimming the surface today. How do we find you?
I'm on Inotar, INOATAR.com, as well as you can find me on LinkedIn, Angela Doyle. So it's good talking to you. It's always good talking to you, Steve.
You too. It's like you validate things that I think. And this is so important. Everything we're talking about, and even more so with AI moving things forward, but are companies and corporations catching up to it? That's the big question.
Well, AI is fast. And here's the thing. AI is always going to be fast, but culture is not. Changing culture and adapting to the culture, that's going to be slow. Culture is always slow.
Appreciate you being here. This is important stuff. All right, we'll catch up next time.
Okay,
thanks.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.